So, Fitbit is out here stealing ideas from Komodo Technologies, WHOOP, and others. This is American innovation at its finest. So, in today's episode, I wanted to kind of talk about Fitbit and the main features, new features that people are talking about that are kind of misunderstood. And among those features are one, the daily readiness score, and the second is the entire stress management system and algorithms and how they really put a number on things such as stress. And we'll even dive into how they came up or maybe found these ideas elsewhere. I don't know. I'm not saying they did. I'm not saying they didn't. But there have been a lot of companies going back to many years that have done this before, and they just didn't have the exposure at the time. First thing, we kind of outlined this in previous articles about Fitbit and their performance ever since Google had acquired them. Now, the main two things that I was looking at was the marketing budget. The marketing and advertising budget went completely south after the purchase, drastically. And the second thing that I was looking at was the R&D budget. So, when a company like Google purchases you, it really shows your initiatives, amongst the new kind of products that you have purchased, which is in Google's case, these companies that are in their portfolio. And when the marketing budget goes down, they're maybe trying to cut a budget, or they purchase the company for other reasons unbeknownst to us. And then the R&D budget, that's kind of clear. If you're not investing in new technologies and into the future, well, that's going to cause an issue for you and your products in the long term. So, what Fitbit does extraordinarily well is marketing and getting people to be active. And they've built a cult following, but that cult following was built with the initial founders that had the passion for it. So the first thing that they have in their toolbox is what they call a daily readiness score. Now, from looking at the website and the literature, what is based on is three things: sleep, activity, and something called heart rate variability. Now, if you're not aware of what heart rate variability is, we'll leave a link. It's just too broad of a subject to go over in 20 seconds. But what I will say about HRV is that it's essentially like a check engine light for your body. So anytime there's any kind of stress response, whether it's from food or exercise or strain, HRV is something that detects it. And it's become extremely popular among wearable technology lovers, fitness lovers, and people that are really into their health and fitness. It's been used already by pro athletes and astronauts and military, and it's now kind of coming in and merging with the consumer side of things. It's looking at those three things, and it's giving you kind of a breakdown. Now, where the stolen idea comes from, if you look at the early adopters, company-wise, much like us, Komodo Technologies, and a company called WHOOP, which a lot of people know about. If you look back at our literature going back, 2 to 5 years, we were talking about the fact that you need more than just sleep analysis. So that's how it started. Sleep is a huge topic of interest nowadays. And actually, we were saying that the way that sleep monitoring worked at this time, and even still to this day, many companies are using this kind of 5 or 6 tier system, right? So you have 6 zones of sleep. And we were saying that, simply, and the way they do it is based on movement, right? That's about the only thing that the majority of the basic sleep trackers, that's how they get their data, from movement. While that's okay, it doesn't really give you the full picture of your sleep, right? So heart rate variability gives you a window into your internal health and what's going on while you're sleeping if you're measuring it before bed and then in the morning, which is what we call morning readiness. So we thought it was very important to mix the two and bring in other factors aside from just movement during sleep. And then at the end of the day, what they say with the daily stress score is, the way they pair the activity into it is, look, we're going to analyze your sleep and your HRV, and then, based on this readiness score, we're going to tell you whether you should be working out or not, right? So this goes on the theory that HRV was primarily used on the consumer side with athletes to measure whether they were recovered from a previous workout or a game and whether they're ready to take on another brutal workout. So based on this HRV number, because if you aren't fully recovered and you go do a extreme workout, you're really bringing that recovery time back, right? So it's just going to take you longer, right? It's kind of the old one step forward, two step back situation. So HRV really gives you that window into your health to make sure you know when to rest, right? Our bodies are so, technical and complex doesn't really do it justice, right? If you talk about other machinery that has sensors, our bodies are much more complex than these machines, right? So it's important to have a biomarker like HRV. So the second thing that Fitbit has came up with was the stress management score. And what this is based on is something called EDA. And if you look through the website, everyone has seen that if you're interested in the device. So EDA is electrodermal activity. At first, it was also called galvanic skin response. That one kind of actually makes more sense once I tell you what it's about. So the short version of the explanation, it's a sweat sensor. Essentially, in simple terms. In more complex terms, it is measuring the resistance of your skin. And the way that it's doing that is by placing electrodes on two different parts of your body. So same kind of electrodes that you'd place for ECG, and they would connect the two electrodes and they would measure the conductivity between those 2 points. Now, the theory is that sweat interferes and it alters the conductivity of the skin. So based on that theory, they're saying that when you sweat, you're under stress. And essentially, when you sweat, that this EDA sensor will detect that and shoot it back into your app or whatever device that you're using. So this one I kind of have an issue with. Sweat is a very obvious response to stress. And it's something that I don't really need a sensor for. It's kind of along the same lines as walking up to a burning building and grabbing one of those temperature readers and pointing it to the fire and saying, "Oh, guys, we got a fire here." So, because once I'm already sweating, I don't really need the sensor. Now, the only application that I could really see this for is not on the consumer side, but more on employee wellness. There's actually a study that I had found, I'll include it in the link, about truck drivers and how the sweat levels were affecting their tiredness level and so on and so forth. When you're talking about an application with employee wellness, sometimes they're not going to tell you when they're under stress, so it's nice to have something like an EDA that could potentially be of help, But, when it comes to the consumer side of things, I don't think it's beneficial. If you're adding all of these things together like Fitbit has planned to do, maybe there's some benefit there. But at the end of the day, we just want you to realize what the sensor is, what's the deal, and that's kind of what it is, to be honest. It's a sweat sensor, and to compare it to heart rate variability, the only similarity that we see here is, if we take it from a really technical standpoint, heart rate variability and EDA, galvanic skin response, right? They are both trying to gauge a response from your autonomic nervous system. That's really all it's trying to do. And your autonomic nervous system is what people would really now know today as fight or flight, right? So you have your sympathetic, you have your parasympathetic. And when you're in parasympathetic state, you're more relaxed, your HRV will be higher, which is good. If you're in sympathetic, it means you're under stress, there's stressors harming your body, and it's not always bad, right? Because digestion is a stressor and, exercise is a stressor. So in that short term, and, especially, the example, if I'm working out, I'm sweating, I don't really need this EDA sensor to tell me that I'm under stress. So it's kind of weird. And, the difference that I make, the EDA as being the, measuring the temperature of a burning house versus HRV, which is kind of like a sensor that tells you when you have a gas leak. So with HRV, you can really avert crisis. And with EDA, I mean, the crisis is here. This is what's going on. And I think there's a lot of also the biggest thing, which I don't have enough time in this video, not all HRV is built the same. And we're going to go into that on a different episode. I'll probably make a part 3 of this, and I'll talk about what the difference between Fitbit's HRV and Fitbit, Apple, and a lot of these other bigger brands. They do HRV the same way, and there is also another way of doing it which is a lot more accurate. So we're going to do that later, so stay tuned, and thanks for watching.